Hi guys, Bran here, and welcome to another commentary video. I told you guys yesterday that I would give you more helpful tips on how to actually, improve and be better at killer, since I make the claim often that your chases should be shorter. So, instead of, just kind of like arguing with about that, I'm just going to actually give you more tips on how to have better and more informed chases and how to play the role better. That way you could have a better time on killer. So, today, I wanted to cover the specific topic of pallets, and more specifically, when should I kick a pallet, when should I leave a pallet down, and when should I leave a pallet up? Because it's something I see a lot of killers have pretty different mentalities about. Usually these mentalities are extremes as well. So I have people that I will go into a killer stream and I'll watch them, and they're like to what I call rhinos or tanks, whatever terminology, like rhinos or tanks. Essentially, all they do is they just run straight at the survivor. They don't like the mind game too much, and they go into every single pallet and they kick every single pallet. Their entire intention is to go to every tile, get the pallet down as quick as possible, and then kick the pallet to get it out of the way as quickly as possible. Now, while that is a fine strategy in some ways, in other ways it's not, because on a map without a lot of resources like Shelter Woods, doing that may be helpful to you. But on other maps like The Game, Garden of Joy, Decimated Borgo, you are going to find that the survivors will have enough pallets to outlast you just running in every pallet and forcing it down. Getting rid of the massive amount of pallets you will be getting rid of will not create massive dead zones later, and it'll essentially be a waste of time and you'll lose the match. Now, I also have the opposite extreme, where, this is mainly influenced by a lot of popular killer streamers who for some reason just refuse to get pallets. I don't know if it's an ego thing, like they want to prove that they're a good killer or whatever, but for some reason, big killer streamers with thousands and thousands and thousands of hours just kind of refuse to kick pallets for some reason. It's a weird phenomenon that I've noticed. So I see a lot of killer players try to adopt this, and to use a similar example, on Shelter Woods, leaving every pallet down doesn't really matter too much, because if you mind game well enough and they decide to, leave the tile to, avoid the mind game, they run into dead zones, because Shelter Woods is full of dead zones. That's fine there. But on a map like Decimated Borgo, there's plenty of tiles you can chain together. Or Suffo Pit. Suffo Pit is a great example. Suffocation Pit, perfect example. Tons and tons and tons of tiles you could chain together. So leaving a pallet down and trying to mind game it just kind of leaves them more space to escape you and run away. So I wanted to kind of give you not just a map by map basis, but kind of just a general mentality, a general rule of thumb. I want to give you a rule of thumb, a middle ground between these two extremes. That way you can have better matches by, having some fun and playing some tiles and doing some neat plays that will get you some snowball pressure. But at the same time, not just running into every pallet and, kicking them all out of the way and going, why did I lose, when it's 2 gens and you've barely gotten a hit. So let's go ahead and break this down. So first off, I want to notify you that the survivor will be marked in the blue happy face, the killer will be marked in the red demon angry face. So let's go ahead and set up our first tile here. So this is going to be a generic path tile, or what people like to call a junk tile. So you'll see these commonly on Macmillan with the wire spools and the junk, or on Yamaoka where it's 2 rocks, which is kind of what I've drawn here is 2 rocks. And there'll just be a single pallet in between here, Now let's say the survivor made it through, killer's chasing, and they throw this pallet down. So why should I either leave this pallet or kick this pallet? For me, I would leave this pallet. I would leave this pallet down. Why? Because this pallet is easily circumventable on both sides. You can run over here and go around, and the survivor has no other choice but to continue running here. And by the time that you make it around and they come to this side of the pallet, you're easily able to clock them with a lunge attack and get the hit on them. So this pallet is actually more beneficial for you to leave up, because you could easily mind game this and get the hit anyways. The pallet by itself is not too strong, and if you want another video on how to determine pallet strength without having to memorize every single match, I made a video about that too, so you should probably go check that out. But since this pallet, you could easily chase them around and get the hit, there's no reason to kick it, because this is to your benefit. Because think about it this way. So let's say you get this hit, Star goes, ow, ow, and then, that was a Legion noise. They go, ow, and they start running. They get a little speed burst, and you kick this, and this is out of the way, right? I can just turn this off. You kick this, and now it's out of the way, right? And let's say we come back to this loop later in the game. So you're coming this way, and the survivor starts running this way, and they see that there's nothing here. What they're going to do is just keep running. They're just going to shift W, and who knows what's down this way? Who knows what's on this side? It could be shack. It could be a long wall jungle gym. It could be a normal jungle gym. There could be a lot of good research. It could be main building. There could be a lot of stuff down this way that you're going to make them run towards anyway. If you just kick the pallet, because now they are more enticed to just leave. But as you know, as I explained, this pallet is easily circumventable. So if you just leave it up and somebody comes here later, you start the process all over again, right? Like you're getting close. They vault it this time, but you just go around. They tries to make it around, but of course killers are faster than survivors. So you make it around in time and you hit the lunge and you get the hit. So this pallet is actually more beneficial to you to keep up and entice them to use this as a resource because it is a weak resource. So it's good for them to stay here because that's going to confirm more hits for you. There are plenty of great examples of tiles like this all over Dead by Daylight that are so weak that it is better to just leave them up, like the desk in RPD, both versions, the pallet behind Badham Preschool, the one that's just between the tree and the fence, perfect example of a tile to leave up. There's like 3 of them on Dead Dog. There's the one with like the water trough. There's the one with the railing by the double vault. There's plenty of tiles like these all over Dead by Daylight. If you see a tile like this where it's just 2 small things on one side or the other, whether it be a pile of junk, 2 rocks, 2 railings, and it's just this and super short, leave this pallet up because this benefits you later in the match. And as a not smart survivor, one that's not as wise, will go here just saying like, oh, I need a resource, and they see the closest resource, they go here. Whereas if you like kicked it, they may not even go this direction and find something stronger. So leave these pallets up. Leave these shorter tiles up. Leave those pallets up if they're thrown. So let's look at an example of a pallet that you should definitely kick and definitely get out of the way. So right here, I have drawn shack. So we have the window here, we have the pallet thrown right here in brown, and we have the normal exit down here. So let's say the survivor got here to shack before you, throws the pallet. You come up here as killer, and you, just at a quick glance, there is no way for you as killer to actually circumvent this pallet. If you go to the right and you try to run around here as killer, the survivors can just sit here. And if they see you peek over here, they can just vault. And if you decide to go the other route, you decide to come around this way and you vault in, you can just vault out. So this is not a pallet that you can circumvent. This is not a pallet that you can mind game basically at all. So you should definitely kick this because this will always be the case. Even if you guys loop around, right? Like if you come through here and the survivor loops this way, you're in the exact same situation, right? You're in the exact same situation, right? Because if you go and you decide to vault out this window, they get to just run around this way, and now you're on opposite sides of shack, so that's really bad. Now on the flip side, if you want to go the other way, which is just weird, go all the way around, and just throwing that out of the way. If they're going all the way around here as killer, obviously they can just take the window out. So essentially there's no way, even if you flip sides of the loop, that there is a way that this is in your advantage. Now, if you looked at the rock tiles, which is weird looking at that together. If you look at the rock tiles, there's an easy way to circumvent this on every side. You can make it to the pallet in just a few steps. 4 or 5 steps, you can make it to the other side of the pallet just because all that's here is a rock. With this, you have to make like a journey on either side to make it around a pallet. So when you're looking at a pallet that it's going to take you like multiple meters worth of travel to get around that pallet, you should just kick this. You should just kick this. You should just get this out of the way, because look what happens when you get this pallet out of the way. So you kick that, they may make it to the window. You pursue, so now they have to come here. So now they have to make a vine game, right? They have to make a guess. So either they come in here and you vault and they're like, oh crap, and they come around here and you catch them medium vaulting on this side. Or, you know, they keep running, you vault in, but you eventually catch them out here. So this makes this only like a moderately strong window and not like a super strong tile. And this even just confined to normal tiles. There's plenty of examples in the game that are very, very common, and I will show you like how these look. All right, so what I've drawn here might look a little bit confusing, But this is a very, very common spawn that often happens mostly on indoor maps, but it happens sometimes in main buildings as well. And one thing that is very, very commonly made as a term in Dead by Daylight is calling something a god pallet. Usually the shack pallet is referred to as a god pallet for the reasons that I talked about earlier, that it's not mind gameable. You could not circumvent shack pallet, so it's called a god pallet because you have to kick it. Now, there are other examples of god pallets on other maps, like I said, mostly on indoor maps, but also main buildings as well. And the reason they're called god pallets is because, like before I showed you, there is no way to circumvent them. What I have drawn here is the back corner of Midwich, where there is a god pallet. There's those two piles of flesh. Remember, this is the hallway at the end of the square, and there's the staircase up here at the top left. And it folds across this entire hallway. This pallet, once dropped, folds across this entire hallway. There is nothing you can do here to circumvent this pallet, no matter what you do at all. You can go here into this classroom, but that's just a wall here, so there's no way to get up the stairs after them. You can go this way, but there's no way to reach this area over here. That's the big thing you need to realize, is no matter which way you go, whether you go left or you go right or you go backwards, nothing you do besides kicking the pallet will get you to the side that the survivor is currently on. They could literally, if you decide to sit there and be stubborn and just be like, no, I won't mind game this, like the survivor can just sit there forever. The only thing that's going to get you to the survivor on the other side of this wall, this pallet rather, is that you need to kick the pallet. You just need to, because there's no way for you to get to this side where they currently are in any way besides actually just kicking the pallet here. So similar examples of this, the pallet outside on the porch, Garden of Joy, no way to circumvent that. The pallet that lays across the entire hallway on the side of Larry's, perfect example. Obviously this one on Midwich. Also the hospital or the infirmary pallet on the same map on Midwich as well also performs this way. You know, the list goes on, but pallets that block an entire hallway or block off an entire room are also pallets that you need to kick, because like we pointed out, there is no way to enter this area back here once this pallet is thrown. It is surrounded on all four sides, well, with a staircase, all four sides by walls or ways that you can't get in. So you need to have to kick this pallet. Okay, I was going to end the video there at the last, covering god pallets in general that appear across maps that aren't shack, but I realized there's a lot of like weird tiles, like long wall, short walls, and there's also like these weird tiles on Autohaven where it'll be the truck sideways like this, and then it'll just be like a pile of tires on this side, and there's a lot of variations of this that appear on multiple maps that aren't really junk tiles, but kind of in a weird way. They're kind of like junk tile plus, like they're actually somewhat good. So I wanted to cover whether you leave these or break these. So these are weird. So it may seem like, oh, well, like, do I leave this? Do I break this? So you may be thinking from like looking on the left side, let's say this is the Autohaven tile where it's just junk tires and this is the truck on this side. If you may think by seeing this on this side, it's like, well, this tile is easily circumventable because this side's short. So if they decide that while I'm looping them that they take the short side, I can just loop back around and hit them. So I should leave the tile upright. Incorrect, because this tile is really strong on this side. Because if they decide to go this way, if the survivor decides that they want to go that way and come around here, you have to come around and chase them. By the time they make it back around to this side, they're going to be able to vault. And you can do little mind games here. Move the whole tile as well. You can do little mind games here, like trying to like bait them on one side or the other. But essentially, they can play the tile on this side. This long side of the tile, they can play this all they want. They can just vault back and forth like interminably until you get like Bloodlust 3000 and maybe get them, but that's a risk. So you should ultimately kick this pallet, because even though it does have a short side that theoretically should be safe to play, a smart survivor will always take the long side of every tile, because that's the stronger side. This is really, you should probably watch the other video before you watch this one, because I feel like that's really a foundation to understanding why you leave and kick certain pallets. So if you want a more fleshed out version of like what I mean by strong and weak pallets, you really do need to watch that video, because that also informs which pallets you kick and you don't. So yeah, if you want a further explanation on that, that's a video. Yeah, definitely, even though you see this side and shorter, and it might be mind gameable, like this side is not. So Just kick it. Just kick it. All right, so hopefully that was a firm, concrete kind of rule of thumb that you could use to figure out whether I should leave a pallet up or whether I should kick a pallet. The extreme of leaving every pallet up is not right. Also, rhinoing through every pallet and kicking every pallet is also not the right answer. Most of these will probably lead you down some level of frustration at some point when you face different teams that know how to play or play in different manners or play way smarter. They're going to lead you down some paths of frustration against certain teams. So, like with most things in life, the best way to, succeed is with compromise. So hopefully that was a good rule of thumb for you to know whether to leave a pallet up or kick it. Please let me know if you would like to see more hints on how to be a better killer, since that is something that, I've spent a lot of time doing. And if I'm going to make the claim that you need to have quicker chases, I ought to help you. So yeah, let me know how you feel about that. But other than that, this will be it for today's video, friends. Thank you so much for watching. But other than that, this will be it for today's video. Thank you so much for being you. And I hope you have a good rest of your day, friends. If I don't see you tomorrow, I'll see you when I see you. Almost didn't say the thing. That was kind of scary. Goodbye. Blah, blah, blah.